It's the new normal. Every night we go to bed wondering who will be the next prominent man accused of serious sexual misconduct by the time we wake up. Today was Matt Lauer, who, as you know, was fired from NBC News after a coworker filed a detailed complaint about inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace. His former Today Show co-anchor, Savannah Guthrie, announced the news at the top of this morning's show.
We just learned this moments ago, just this morning. As I'm sure you can imagine, we are devastated, and we are still processing all of this. You know, for the moment, all we can say is that we are heartbroken. I'm heartbroken for Matt. He is my dear, dear friend and my partner, and he is beloved by many, many people here. And I'm heartbroken for the brave colleague who came forward to tell her story, and any other women who have their own stories to tell.
In a memo sent to staff, NBC News President Andy Lack said it was, quote, the first complaint about Matt's behavior in the over 20 years he's been at NBC News, but they were also presented with reason to believe this may not have been an isolated incident. This afternoon, Variety gave us a little more detail and a warning: it is disturbing detail. According to the report, Lauer once gave a colleague a sex toy as a present, along with a note about how he wanted to use it on her. They say he also summoned a female employee to his office, dropped his pants, showing her his penis, then reprimanded her for not engaging in a sexual act. And those are just some accounts from 10 different current and former employees, several of whom said they'd complained to executives about Lauer's behavior before. We also learned today that Garrison Keillor, the former host of A Prairie Home Companion, was fired by Minnesota Public Radio over accusations of improper sexual behavior. In a letter to the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, Keillor claims, I put my hand on a woman's bare back, I meant to pat her back after she told me about her unhappiness, and her shirt was open and my hand went up it about 6 inches. She recoiled, I apologized, I sent her an email of apology later, and she replied she had forgiven me and not to think about it, we were friends. We continued to be friendly right up until her lawyer called. But Keillor went on to say, if I had $1 for every woman who asked to take a selfie with me and who slipped an arm around me and let it drift down below the belt line, I'd have at least $100. So this is poetic irony of a high order, he wrote. Keillor also happens to have a column in the Washington Post today, talk about irony, ridiculing the idea that Senator Al Franken should resign over the harassment accusations against him. So, can we do anything beyond simply reacting to the daily story on yet another high-profile man getting ousted for sexual misconduct? Joining me to talk about that are Tina Opie, an assistant professor at Babson College. Good to see you again, Tina. Good to see you. Ellen Zucker, a partner of Burns Levinson, who has represented multiple women in sexual misconduct claims against their employers. Nice to see you, Ellen. I don't want to talk about the insufferable Garrison Keillor. I want to talk about the big one today. What's the impact of arguably the highest profile public figure being outed today, Matt Lauer, or is it just another brick in the wall, as the saying goes?
I don't think it's another brick in the wall. I think, you know, what we are seeing is in many ways a reckoning for men in power, who think that they, for years and years and years, have thought that they could get away with this sort of conduct, use the women in their workplace as their toys, and just keep on going. It really defies credulity that this was the first time they ever heard about it.
Like you're talking, well, particularly if the Variety story is true.
Yeah. Well, and these things don't happen once, and they don't happen in isolation. And you know, there was some detail in the Variety story that the guy had a button on his desk so he could lock it
without getting up to do it.
Without getting up. And so, you know, there's stuff going on here that we have to wrestle with as a society beyond whether it's NBC or, you know, WGBH.
But you can say it, but, you know, but Tina, but I worry that even if it's the big guys like this, do we get from here to the promised land by just every day having another one and another one? Or is there got to be like a bigger something, whatever that is, to get from here to there?
Yeah, I really think this speaks to culture and toxic cultures that are at place in many of the workplaces across the country and across the world. So I think managers, leaders need to reckon with their own workplaces and recognize, okay, this hasn't necessarily happened to us yet, but it could. What are the things we can do to actually prevent that? maybe let's listen to women in our organization and hear what their experiences have actually been.
Yeah, but I hope it doesn't mean my door is always open, because, as a former union president myself, I know my door is always open means something to a high-level employee.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean anything to a vulnerable,
Correct.
lower-level
Correct.
employee. So culture is part of the key in changing it. How do you change it, particularly when there's a guy himself who has been accused of being a serial sexual harasser who tweets almost flippantly about this today, the President of the United States. Wow, Matt Lauer was just fired from NBC for inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace, but when will the top executives at NBC and Comcast be fired for putting out so much fake news? Check out Andy Lack's past. It's not only dismissive, it's almost...
But I think what we're hearing right now is women saying, okay, we need a reset on the rules of the game. We are not going to take that as the as our entry to a workplace dynamic. We're not going to assume that we have to stay silent and say it's okay. But what workplaces have to do is they have to make sure that the rules are clear. And it isn't just a kind of political correctness. It means that there is actually reception to hearing about concerns. And, the way Andy Lack is probably not lying in what he said is maybe somebody didn't go to HR and file a formal complaint. But they talked to executives who kind of went,
but Ellen,
that's
really
Lauer being Lauer.
Do you
right?
really think that people don't already know the rules? I mean, do you think that he didn't know it was against the rules to show someone a sex toy and then reveal his penis? I think men know the rules. I think it's clear what the rules are. I think the problem is you have cultures that facilitate this kind of behavior and allow it. And because many times women are not in positions of power to complain about it, they can't do anything about it.
But that's right. So the rules have to mean...
I think
there have to be not only formal
be
rules, but there have to be all sorts of messages sent by workplaces saying, we mean it.
Which is the culture.
And we mean it.
Yeah.
And what that means is, executive, if you hear anything, you have to bring it forward. And our job as HR is not just to cover up, but to deal.
Yeah. But I've said this almost every night for the last month, so my apologies to the people at home. The quote that has stuck with me more through this whole couple of months since Weinstein was Quentin Tarantino saying, I've seen enough to have done more, something like that. Correct. So we're talking about rules for perpetrators or in waiting. We're talking about rules that give greater incentive and protection for people who are the victims, the survivors here. How about the people who see this, which I assume all of us have at one time in our career, and decided for whatever reason, politics, fear, to say nothing? Those people have to enter this cultural change too,
well,
no?
What they have to realize is that there is a cost to the organization, there's a cost potentially to their future if they don't participate in the solution.
I'm sorry, Ms. Zucker, there's a cost to me if I do speak up. How do you protect me?
And I have to tell you, in my work,
sometimes
I hear
you won't
that,
be protected, Jim.
What's that?
No, but I hear that all the time from women and from potential witnesses. The number of potential witnesses who have seen things and then don't want to remember it because it's not in their interest to remember it, is heartbreaking. And that requires a deep social change that is hard to do. Look, I had a case recently where a guy, it was a rough and tumble kind of workplace, and there were all sorts of awful things said and done all the time. And I said to him, did you ever hear women called all sorts of impermissible names? Did you hear their body parts discussed? Yes, yes, yes. And he said, but over time it got much better. It happened rarely. And I said, well, what's rarely? What's rarely? Oh, once or twice a week. Wow. So, well, what did you do about it?
Right.
These were private conversations. I didn't do anything. And nobody took him to task for that.
Okay, so I'm reading right before you two showed up, I was reading the New York Times homepage and catching up on the stories, and they have reader reaction. The first reader reaction that was up there for about a minute was from a woman who said, I'm worried that if this goes too far, whatever this is, there's going to be a witch hunt. Meaning, essentially, that guys are going to be victimized, not the women, that guys are going to... How do you respond to that woman?
Listen, this is what I would say. How would she feel if it was her child? If it was her... Maybe she's experienced it. I have no idea. I guess we have to, as a society, this is a bigger issue than what's going on in the workplace. This is what's going on. What are parents teaching their kids? What are teachers saying in the classroom? My daughter has had situations where people may have wanted to snap her bra. I've given her permission to punch the kid in the face, but that's not acceptable. But yet, him snapping the bra is just boys being boys. So I guess what I have... Let's see if it leads to a witch hunt. That's controversial to say. I doubt it.
Okay, will it lead to backlash?
I-
You worry as a
It could.
lawyer about backlash?
I worry about backlash.
Well,
and
what
I
does that
worry,
mean? What does
and
that
you know,
mean?
the reality is that there are people who use the law to ill effect. They do. They make false allegations. Men make false allegations against women
What
during
percentage?
divorces. Women make false allegations against men.
Very,
that happens.
very few women
It's-
make
yeah, the
false
statistics.
But
allegations.
that is, but that happens. But it happens. What I was about to say is that happens rarely.
Yeah.
And what we have to do, the deck is so stacked against a woman raising concerns that it happens rarely. The backlash we have to be worried about in this time where Donald Trump can get elected is this sort of misguided sense of cultural grievance that will make people, disparage those claims over time.
Listen,
Particularly when we have a federal
I
judiciary
disagree.
that's going to be stacked.
I agree with
by
many-
You get the
him.
last 30 seconds.
Well, I guess what I'd say is backlash. People are always going to have grievances against underrepresented or people who are not in positions of power speaking up and voicing their grievances. Let's go for that. Leave it where it may be. If you said earlier white men have grievances and feel like they're being disempowered, let's see.
Let's
if
see how that
happens.
looks.
Speaking of
Yeah.
disempowered, Ned, when you return, because we're out of time, I want to put up with something Barbara Ehrenreich said. Our current sex harassment discussion is woefully class skewed, too much about actresses and not enough
Absolutely.
about hotel
I
housekeepers.
couldn't
Yes.
agree
That's for the
more.
next discussion. Gina, it's good
Thanks
to
so
see
much,
you.
Tim.
Ellen, great to see you. Thanks so much
Nice
for your
to see
time.
you.
Appreciate it.